Now, depending on whether or not you finished on the Denisovan video or you're finishing on this one, this is technically your last video for the course. So we're just going to go through a few questions on Neanderthals. These are all in the back of your book. So the first one here is on page 18. I'll read through the question, then I'll say pause and count to 3, and then at the end, I'll count back from 3. And then at the end of that, I'm going to go through the answers with you. So Neanderthals lived in the cold climate of Europe and Asia from 200,000 to 30,000 years ago. You can see they're giving you this data. You don't have to remember all these years. You don't have to remember all this stuff, just trends. Yeah, that Australopithecus came before Homo, that Homo neanderthalensis and Denisovans and Homo sapiens all coexisted around the same time, and we must have interbred at various junctions. So modern humans and Neanderthals coexisted for around 10,000 years. Fossil evidence indicates that Neanderthals shared much behaviour with modern humans. Scientists are undertaking research to find reasons why Neanderthals became extinct, but humans survived. So fossil evidence of the use of sewing needles and the division of labour between men and women was found only for modern humans and not for Neanderthals. Suggest one advantage. So again, this is a suggest question, girls. I haven't talked to you about sewing needles. I haven't talked to you about the division of labour between men and women. You need to think outside of the box, outside of the study design, and think, why would those things be an advantage? So pause, write down your answer, and I'm going to go through it in 3, 2, 1. Okay. So the use of sewing needles, what might be the benefit of using sewing needles? And what I'm hoping you're going to say is something to do with clothing, which means you can survive when it's colder. Now, even if you just said they could make coats, they could sew coats so that they could survive the winter. Great. That's fine. That's an advantage. It's a suggested advantage. The division of labour between men and women is that the males might be physically stronger, so they're going to go out and hunt. The females are going to stay home and care for the young while the men go out and hunt and collect a lot of resources, so that not everyone has to be hunting at all the time. So it's that division that means you play to each other's strengths, that we're still trying to break down that wall. I get it. The last bit says people today with non-African heritage. Yeah, so if you have non-African heritage, then you tend to carry some Neanderthal DNA. So why might that be the case? So what I'm thinking is non-African, so it must have been after the divergence of, after humans left Africa. So what it suggests is that interbreeding must have occurred between them. All right, so this time I'm going to go to page 20. I'm going to read through the question, then I'm going to tell you to pause, count to 3, and then we'll go through the answer. So question 11 says, fossil evidence indicates that between 30 to 80,000 years ago, populations of 2 hominin species of modern humans, Homo sapiens, and the extinct Neanderthals, Homo neanderthalensis, lived close to each other in parts of the Middle East, Europe, and Asia. Researchers have constructed a theory about relationships between ancient populations. This is represented in the following diagram. Recent DNA evidence has shown that the genome of living humans of African descent does not contain Neanderthal DNA, and the genomes of living humans in East European, East Asian, and Australian Aboriginal descent all contain small amounts of Neanderthal DNA. So it's the same question. Can you see how they can't ask you much more than the same kind of questions? So suggest how DNA, this is very similar, from Homo neanderthalensis, again it's a suggest, entered the genome of present-day European, East Asian, and Australian Aboriginal Homo sapiens and continues to be found in modern populations. This time we've got 2 marks. The second part of the question says, what implication does this DNA evidence have for the classification of the 2 hominin species, Homo sapiens and Homo neanderthalensis, according to the common definition of a species? So I want you to pause, and then I'm going to go through the answer in 3, 2, 1. All right. So the question here says, suggest how it entered the genome. and continues to be found. There's my split. Suggest and continues to be found. So what it says to me is that the Neanderthals must have interbred with the ancestors, not with the Europeans, but with the ancestors of present, say, Europeans, and that they keep passing on that DNA. Yeah, because there's more generations. So long as you can identify that gene flow occurs, so that there was migration and immigration and interbreeding between the two populations, that's fine. The second question says, what implication does it have according to the definition of a species? If they're interbreeding, they aren't separate species. And that's what I was talking about before. So we're actually saying that now we think it's Homo sapiens neanderthalensis, and Homo sapiens sapiens. So we are subspecies, but we are not completely different species. Last two questions I've got for you. So modern African Homo sapiens do not contain Neanderthal DNA. Are you getting the pattern? This is now the third exam question that's told you that humans from Africa don't have Neanderthal DNA. They love to tell you this. You don't need to remember that, but you probably will because there are so many questions on it. So modern non-African Homo sapiens contain a small percentage of Neanderthal DNA because of the interbreeding between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. This interbreeding is thought to have occurred within a time period of 65 to 47,000 years ago. A recent study has found Homo sapiens DNA was in the genomes of 100,000-year-old Neanderthal DNA. From this new discovery, it would be reasonable to conclude. So we thought the interbreeding happened between 65 to 47, but they've found Homo sapiens DNA in Neanderthals that are 100,000 years old. So are we thinking that modern Africans are the descendants of Neanderthals? I'm thinking no, because they don't have any Neanderthal DNA. There was an early migration of Homo sapiens. Sorry, guys, we're on page 27 if you haven't stopped and found that page already. And then if you also haven't paused, you want to go through the rest of these answers, and I'll go through it in 3, 2, 1. All right. So there was an early migration of Homo sapiens out of Africa before 100 years ago, 100,000 years. This sounds reasonable because we know Neanderthals aren't in Africa, so the Homo sapiens must have traveled to them. So the ancestors of modern Africans migrated from Europe to Africa between this and this. Again, it's very similar to that first question. The Africans, human race started in Africa and diverged from there. Yeah, this is our current belief. Approximately 100,000 years ago, Neanderthals bred with Homo sapiens in Africa before the Neanderthals spread. So all three, this one here, again, it says that the Neanderthals were in Africa. They weren't in Africa. Yeah? So our best answer is that there must have been some Homo sapiens that left Africa and went out into Europe or even that kind of Middle Eastern section, and then they interbred. So the last question I'm going to go through is question number 36, again on page 27. I would pause, I would read it, and I would give it a go. So let's go through it in 3, 2, 1. So in recent years, scientists have discovered that Neanderthals took care of their elderly relatives. They had burial rituals for their dead and gave symbolic meaning, to natural objects. Studies have shown that Neanderthals used complex methods to obtain sharp stone implements and produced glues to attach sharp stones to spears. This suggests a couple of things. Now, technically, this has kind of been removed from the study design, but we're still going to go through it anyway. Does it suggest that they had bigger brains? Look, perhaps, but it's not really enough evidence to me to say that they have bigger brains. Does it suggest that they have a culture? To me, yes, that's pretty reasonable, but let's just check. Do they suggest it lives a solitary lifestyle? If you're taking care of your elderly relative, I don't know how you would be living a solitary lifestyle. And so the last one here is it suggests that they have a written language. There's nothing here to talk about pens or some kind of writing implements, so I'm going to say no. And so this is all about cultural evolution. If you come across them, give them a go. They're not too awkward generally to get through. And that is the last video for area of study 1.4.